I just want to say hi, Teaching, and thanks, Flo, for the introduction. It's a real treat for me to do this session, slightly different from what I've done, but super interesting because this is a space that everybody's talking about. We understand that there's a dearth of talent here locally, so definitely very useful to tap your brain. So I just want to tell everybody in the audience that Yicheng and I have never met in person. This is literally the first time that I'm seeing you, correct?
Absolutely.
So I think what you can be assured of is a very organic session, very authentic session, right? So, we're going to make things up as we go. We're going to establish a nice flow of questioning and so on and so forth. And so to kick it off, I want to ask you this one big one, okay? And I guess,
Sure.
anyone that's been on my sort of webinars, I always ask about their person's professional history. And then for you, it's no different lah. So I'm going to ask you, Cheng. Flo's given us a quick overview of your professional experience, but I want to hear it from you. And then I think it's important because we also want to establish where your perspectives are coming from when we're doing this session, right? You've
Yes.
just been working in FI and now you're in BPP. So where are your perspectives coming from, and the experiences that has shaped you to who you are and what you're seeing right now? Maybe it's a very big question, but I'm going to let you try to take a stab at that.
Sure. Thanks. Thank you, Adrian. Hi, everyone. And I'm very grateful for IBF for inviting me to this session. Maybe just a bit more about myself and what I've done in my career. I think first and foremost, I was very clear back in university that I wanted to be part of the banking environment. I think that has always been something that I was very clear about. It could be influences from family, or friends or relatives, but it was something that was very specific to me, even as I was going to before I graduated. And so upon graduation, I was with the consumer banking wealth management arm for Citibank, and I never really looked back. I really enjoy myself. I think the wealth management space in Singapore, it's a growth story. It's amazing how it's transformed itself. I think back in the day, when Citi was very focused on clients at above 1 million, back then we already saw how there was a big burgeoning sort of interest in the wealth management industry, and we have many family offices setting up here in Singapore as we know it now. But for me, I think I had the opportunity to spend some time in business development, in wealth advisory, in marketing segment, business management teams for these individuals. And I thought I would like to share a tidbit, right, of one of the things that we did since this Chinese New Year. Traditionally Chinese New Year, and banks are always very busy with changing of new notes and whatnot. And it wasn't very much different back then. But we pamper our high net worth clients to no end. At some point, I remember we had Cisco sending new money to our clients. So they didn't have to come to the bank. We send new money to your doorstep. It was really really nice, and obviously clients were very happy with it. And so I spent more than a decade in different roles in banking and wealth management, specifically on high net worth. And then I had the opportunity to get into a fintech company a couple of years back. And again, I think I'm very blessed and very privileged to have that, because I was in a space where we were trying to create a technology that was enabled structured finance, supply chain financing program to take place with just a click of a button. Traditionally, it'll take months to get things sorted with the varying to and fro between supplier, anchor buyers, banks, and all that. And we enable everything with just a click of a button. It was really really easy. Money flow was so fast. It was exhilarating, and I spent a couple of years there being part of that startup environment. Very exciting space, and I was really blessed to be given the opportunity to do so. And now, for the past 2 years, I've been with BPP. Obviously, it's another journey for me, and I'm very excited to be here.
It's very interesting, your story, and I'm tempted to ask you something,
Sure.
but maybe I'll save it till later.
Sure.
So, your career journey, I think, from me listening to it, there are some common threads, but then there's such differing threads as well. So maybe we can just dive deep a little bit more on like how does a consumer banker, like a BD person yourself, find yourself moving away from an FI or FIs and into BPP, and then also we overlay that with that new domain of ESG, and sustainable finance. How did that happen? Was it planned, or
Sure.
Or yeah.
It was actually, I think, in a way, um, it was what I did that got around, because I was always very involved in training. I was always very involved
Okay.
in the L&D teams. Even though I was not
Mm,
specifically in L&D teams, I was always invited to train, to give whatever learning sort of experiences to new bankers and whatnot, and did a lot of training. In fact, I go back to schools to give some training sometimes from experiences on what I did. So I think what got around that, I was huge on that space, and somehow I got I contacted for this role
mm,
for I represent BP for the role of talent development solutions for
mhm,
financial services, specifically in Asia Pacific, and so in my role I speak very frequently to banks, insurers, asset management,
mm, mm,
especially essentially all financial services industry, and understand their needs in talent development. But
mm,
why ESG and how
mhm,
sustainability finance find itself within this is that I think it really is such that there is so much demand, and the conversations all lead to the same, where um essentially most of the FIs we speak to, everyone's on their mind about what ESG will do for them, or what risk they are not prepared for to undertake, and I think that with that, with the demand being of such, and BP being a company that's very sensitive to the needs of their clients, and so we were very focused and very sure that we want our programs to be pivoted towards the same cause. So I think
mm.
it was, I would say, planned and not planned at the same time.
Okay, got it. And a double whammy question, I think. I will wrap a couple of questions into one. I mean, since you talked a bit about BPP, right? For the folks here who may not be familiar with the brand, here's an opportunity for you to tell us a bit more about BPP.
Hmm.
So they were a bit more familiar in terms of what the firm does.
Hmm.
And also maybe on top of that, when you mentioned about talking to FIs, maybe you can also comment about what you believe attributes to the surge and interest of ESG. Because for myself, right, I think in talking to people and job seekers or professionals, right, that term didn't really come up too frequently. I remember having a conversation with a banker who was based in Hong Kong, and he was in the firm for a very, very long time, very long time. And then and one day he tells me that, you know what, I want to leave and I want to get into ESG. And I thought it was like, wow, that's such an interesting and gutsy move. And then from then, I hear it more and more often. It becomes, front and center for many organizations. So basically, okay, come back to the two questions, right? So tell us a bit more about BPP as an organization, what you guys do, but also at the same time, your personal experiences, thoughts on the surge and the interest in this space.
Absolutely, absolutely. BPP stands for Burley Prior. So essentially, these are surnames of our founders, Alan Briley, Richard Price, and Charles Pryor. So that's was BPP, not Bukit Panjang Plaza in Singapore, I think. Uh, it is headquartered in London, right? And we've been leading the professional training landscape for over 45 years.
Mhm,
We partner more than 7,000 businesses across industries, with many of them working with us on an exclusive basis.
mhm,
And our materials are used globally in more than 170 countries. We provide training to professionals in more than 86% of FTSE 100 companies as well.
mhm,
And we train legal professionals in 4 out of 5 Magic Circle law firms, and obviously all professionals from Big Four accountancy firms. We upskill 9 out of 10 leading global investment bank employees as well, right? So on that note, just wanted to share also that
mhm,
what are the drivers,
mm.
on ESG that we've been seeing. So it is
Yes.
quite a case where we see business leaders being under the spotlight, to display tangible ESG initiative progress, right? There could be pressure from shareholders, but
Mm.
but really we see more and more APAC businesses commit publicly to achieving sustainability targets, right? You hear of a CEO of a large company suddenly announcing that, oh, our organization will be net zero by
Net
a
zero. Yep.
specific year, right?
Yep. Yep.
And but once these commitments are in place, then financial institutions, the organizations then find themselves reflecting on whether they
Mm,
have the plans, or more importantly, do they have the skilled talent pool in
mm.
place to translate these ambitions into actual results?
Reality. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we also see ESG demand drivers arising from central banks and regulators with framework and policies being rolled out. Just like how in Hong Kong and in Singapore, we have reporting frameworks for listed companies requirements starting this year, right? And there are also green solutions demand from clients across retail, commercial, corporate, and private banking space. So the clients themselves are asking, are there any green products, right? And with I think more important, in my personal opinion, is that with millennials, the Gen Z population not now
Yeah.
starting to form the majority of workforce by 2030. So
Mm.
employees in this category are expecting their employers to demonstrate ESG awareness and
Responsibility.
values. Exactly. So I think all of these are drivers driving that surge and interest. But I
Mm.
personally feel the biggest driver of all that really kind of knocked everybody off and really looked at ESG is
Mm.
COVID. You see,
Right.
with COVID,
Right.
everybody started to think about sustainability in a way, this unaccounted risk suddenly happening. Businesses, how do we continue in another sort of case that will happen like that again, right? So everybody started to think about how do we then prepare themselves, right, in a sustainable fashion. And ESG itself has been around for a long time. It's just that these key drivers, ESG, environmental, social, and governance,
Yes.
always seem to be the main themes or easy to club sort of themes that essentially lead to the same objective of sustainability.
Mm. I also just want to ask maybe a very basic question. Okay, we understand that, in terms of the landscape, I think, like Hong Kong you mentioned, I think we talked about that, is a bit more advanced, and for us, we're not there yet, right? Um, what, what open-ended question. What is it about ESG that is so, I mean, what skills in ESG makes it so hard to find individuals? Or what are those things that our FIs are looking for that they can't find? I mean, what makes an ESG professional so special?
Well, I think the differentiating factor of
Mm.
someone who is an ESG professional, right? I think
Mm.
essentially you
Mhm.
will always look back at two
Yep.
things. One, you look at experience, you look at qualifications, right?
Mhm.
To say, okay, this person is an ESG professional versus someone who's not, right? But
Right.
I think that maybe at this juncture, I could share a bit about our research that we did
Mhm.
with clients in the financial services
Mhm.
industry.
Mhm.
We did our research last year, and we found ESG to be a growing strategic priority for most, if not all, organizations globally, with over 53% rating ESG as extremely or very important. And also, but more importantly, we found many organizations lack a clear understanding of ESG and its impact on the business performance. And from a geographical perspective, Asia Pacific is at a nascent stage, really, as compared to US and Europe, as we have a huge deficit of experienced ESG talent, right? So I think that when we say we have an ESG professional in front of us, they are able to think in a manner where what would um, the actions that are being carried forth, what kind of impact it will have on the organization, be it and how would that action then lead to further risk down the road. So I think all of these will be something that someone who has an ESG background will be able to bring to the table. You're on mute, actually, Adrian. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
There you
No,
go.
so there's one more thing I wanted to ask, and I don't know whether, I mean, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Cheng, but um, in my experience, when I sort of like work with people, job seekers and whatnot, I think the hottest thing in that whole umbrella is it was things like sustainable investing or impact investing, investing for good, and so on and so forth. And that presumes a certain set of skills. Like, for example, you used to be a banker like IBD, like, well, for example, investment banking or something like that. But it's so much more than that, right? I mean, are you able to sort of like tell us, maybe not all of it, but what are the big themes under ESG or the subdomains within ESG? You know what I mean? Like that folks who are joining us who are new to this space can sort of like use it as a starting point to do some research on their own to figure out more.
Sure, absolutely. In the space of ESG, typically we will zero in on environmental factors, social
Mm,
factors, and governance factors, right?
mm-hmm,
On the environmental factors, essentially one of the key themes that people will be very focused upon is climate change,
mm-hmm,
rising temperature, right?
mm,
And what are companies doing to sort of reduce that? To give an example, right, for financial services and it's
mm,
just for banks, for example,
mm.
banks
Yeah.
prov- banks are important and integral service in a society. And when, for example, when a bank decides to say that, okay, we will now focus our lending business or activity to companies that show or to clients that show a strong endeavor to limit their carbon emission, right? Or we would now focus our business activities to companies that will hit a certain target within the industry for carbon emission levels. So that would make a huge change in the
Mm,
way businesses operate, right?
mm,
And then again, banks as an investment sort of a vehicle, where we say investors invest through financial services industry, and so
yeah.
if the asset management arm, for example, the fund, it's very focused on investing in companies that are leaders in green technology or in that field, and so you see new fresh money obviously now poured out into these sectors and these companies, right? And so all of these will then drive companies to be very focused on change on green on green efforts, if I can put it, and
Mm-hmm,
and that would then change the way companies behave, individuals behave, um, and I think that in a part from the environmental perspective would then drive a lot of job changes also. Right,
mm-hmm,
demand for professionals in the various space to do the various things. I think we can talk more about it in detail. In the social factor space, essentially, it's really about inclusion, about diversity, and about modern day slavery. Even I think it's about really thinking about fairness and inclusiveness as a society. So I
mm-hmm,
think that is usually from an employee perspective, you want to think about your company as one that is fair and that's inclusive, and one that is well representing the employee segment at large. And from the governance perspective, which is always so very interesting with the likes of cryptocurrency firms
Oh yeah.
that
Oh
are
yeah.
all in the news. I think um, the thing about governance, it's always what we call a post-mortem, where something bad happens, then we realize that, that the governance was always a little bit iffy or wasn't always as perfect as it thought of to
Yeah.
be.
Mm,
I mean, there are many cases from Enron, right, to our financial crisis before,
yeah.
and to
Yeah.
many, right? So,
Yeah.
so governance, it's always a aftermath, and but yet at the same time, I think that governance factors play a huge part in ensuring the sustainability of a company because so long as factors are put in place and well reported and well managed,
Yeah.
you obviously will have a longevity of your business, right? So that's why but who is monitoring that? Who is
Mm-hmm,
reporting that?
mm-hmm.
I think it's important. So again, governance factors are also well placed in the entire scheme of things.
Awesome. Okay, so now sort of like defined it in silos, I guess in the E and the S and G. Let's talk about a bit more tangible things. Like when you talk to FIs, banks, FIs on sell side, buy side, for example, um, keeping in mind what the ESG stands for, are there any trends in terms of qualifications or certifications in ESG that tend to have been more popular and sought after? When you talk to these FIs, has there been sort of like a trend in terms of, a lot of people are, a lot of banks are asking for this thing in particular, and that can dovetail into, enlightening us on which of the E, S, or G is, hottest, sort of like, which space is growing more, which qualifications are more sought after, from what you see. And I guess the third thing would be the space that provides the least barriers of entry for someone who's looking to make that switch into that space without necessarily having a prior background? You know what I mean? So I know I hit you with three sub questions. Sorry, but maybe those three things can if all of them can meet, and there's one source of there's one answer, then great lah. But so basically, which area is growing the most, and which qualifications do you see banks are asking for, and of course, which one is the least barriers of entry in your opinion? So
Sure.
tough
It's going to
questions.
be a long question, a long answer.
Sorry
Sorry,
about that.
it's
Yeah,
got a long answer.
go
But
for it. Yeah.
I think that I wouldn't say that there is a specific focus on the E or S or G. Just that from a perspective of risk, I think all three has to be equally measured. But I think one of the two, I think I would just also be very specific about what sort of qualifications are very sought after, right, by FIs. The FIs know that you cannot find someone, and you need a lot of people. You cannot just say that, okay, I would like 20 people with 20 years of experience in
by
ESG by
tomorrow.
tomorrow. even by next year, I think it's gonna be tough. So,
That's true.
and they know, right? I mean, Asia Pacific is something new to Asia Pacific in the first place. So I think everyone is cognizant of the fact that there is not a lot of experience in what we do, but I think that'll be very different going 5-10 years down the road. But one of the two that I hear very often that they are looking for, it's the CFA, the Chartered Financial Analyst Certificate in ESG investing. I think that is one qualification that is very very specific, and there's the brand to it, the quality of the curriculum, the rigor. It's one that employers recognize very much. And also, I mean, I've taken the qualification myself, and I've passed it. I would just say that through this particular course, I have also gained a lot of insight as to perspective of how we look at a company, whether or not a company is really not greenwashing, not having fake declarations, but rather very focused on what they do and how they have even third party sort of reviewers coming in to audit that declarations and disclosure. The other qualification that I thought was also very sought after is the EFFAS, the European Federation of Financial Analyst Societies. EFFAS, it's been a mouthful. Certified ESG Analyst qualification, right? That is very popular with, especially for risk professionals. So this one is also one that I do hear quite a fair bit. But obviously they are quite different in the qualification, that content. But essentially all leading to the same thing, where what is ESG truly about, and how do you assess a company on an ESG level? So, and for me, I think that before we kind of understand what sort of job roles will require ESG expertise, right? Other than an ESG team that is formed up, right? I think it has to be one has to understand how ESG essentially is being adopted, the strategy that's being adopted by banks, right? One of which firm Sustainalytics, they have a generic publication on how the ESG strategies that banks will adopt, and I've actually seen it actually happening in some of the banks in Asia Pacific. So normally banks will start with negative screening. Right, negative screening is the reason why they started off is because that will be actually the easiest way to get going. Where and also very common and popular technique with the asset management arm. So they were to exclude and avoid transactions or activities that do not fulfill or are not aligned with ESG standards or framework. So you can imagine areas like tobacco, in areas where it's high carbon emission, things like that. So even with this sort of policy that a financial institution want to roll out, you will need analysts, you need portfolio managers, you need operation, you need compliance, you need risk professionals that are able to screen, they are able to exclude transacting with the vendors, the clients, the partners, and all that. I think there is a lot of roles that are involved, even just by adopting such a initial policy. And obviously, if you want to get even further down the road with this, is to really think about policies that will go further down scope 3 emissions, where you deal with the supply chain. So imagine the bank says, okay, I want to roll a policy that will have negative screen. I do not want my borrowers to be involved in such industry. Then scope 3 means you go beyond that client. You go the client's client, the sort of supply chain sort of
The chain, yeah.
yeah, and it's not easy. You need to have someone who's trained, someone who understands, to be able to do the investigative work to ensure that the supply chain it fulfills the scope 3 emission targets.
Yeah.
So that is the typical start for banks. So, and then most banks will then move on to positive screen. Now, negative, we know we take away negative. So positive screen now, it's a little bit more difficult because they will now that employees will now need to have the expertise to select best-in-class screen companies and sectors, where they need to compare and improve on ESG scores against industry peers, and you can just only imagine how the kind of skills that you will need for someone who is ESG professional to be involved in such a endeavor, right? And obviously after that, it gets more difficult into the integration of ESG into the bank's portfolio, actual portfolio. So people in the finance team, the treasury team, the risk and regulatory reporting managers will all need fluency in the ESG subject, right? It's a lot, because from that to thematic investing, to be very certain of a certain theme that they're trying to drive, for example, fulfilling certain targets of UN SDGs, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and you need very specific sort of skills to be able to be familiar with the goals, the measurement, the tracking and reporting of these projects. So I think one of my, I think that there are quite a lot, but at the end of it, I think the one that is most important, I think it's really the strategy of engagement of ESG, because that will essentially change the influence and really socialize the society's behavior towards ESG issues. So I can tell you examples like client-facing professionals, right? Investment managers, your relationship managers, all client-facing professionals being fluent in the ESG conversation, right? I mean, it's not enough to say that, oh, don't use plastic bags. We stop giving up plastic bags because you want to be good environment. No, to say why so? What's wrong with using plastic bags, for example, right? And so I think the key here is being able to articulate the urgency for everyone to play their part in the environment or social change. So I think there are many roles involved, as I had described, not specific to just the ESG team, a small group of people who's supposed to drive the change of the entire organization. No, it's really everywhere.
I think you make good points. So basically what you're trying to say is picking up an ESG awareness or course or something is so much more valuable than, it's so much more valuable than just focusing on working in an ESG team, because even like what you mentioned of a compliance professional or an investment manager, for example, could benefit from awareness of that topic. So for example, someone who may not want to go into ESG hardcore, and join the ESG team, picking up some sort of knowledge or background in it would be very valuable in current times, right? I mean, that's okay.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So the next one I want to ask, and I'm coming back to my career coaching roots. Okay, this one is a bit career related. Now, do you have any good examples of folks who have taken a course and sort of like directly get hired? I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. I'm sure that there has to be, but I'm cautious to say that just because you take a course, there's a job going to be waiting there for you. I mean, that's quite linear in that sense. There are obviously a lot of other factors, right? In someone getting a role, but what's your thoughts on the value of picking up a solid qualification, EFFAS or a CFA, sustainable investing, for example, right? And getting a role thereafter, because we want to make sure that if it is a magic bullet, then okay. I mean, if your opinion is it's measurable, then great. But if it's not, and there's other things to think about, what are those other things that someone should think about, just apart from just picking up a a qualification?
Sure. I think at the end of the day, it's really bread and butter, right? I mean, we want to say that okay, I'm picking up a skill, but what is in it for me, right? And something that is very concrete. Whilst we can say there's a lot of demand for, I think something that's very concrete that was shared on the South China Morning Post just on 26th of January, is that the title was climate change and Hong Kong to pay 30% more for ESG jobs as companies fight for talent to meet sustainability targets, right? And I, I think that that's very telling because that clearly shows that there is an insufficient supply for that demand, and hence salary premium. There's only one way to go; it has to go up,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So,
fight for
so,
talent, right?
so you have to fight for talent. So I think that's quite obvious. But I think that as I explained, ESG knowledge is no longer just meant for people in the ESG or sustainability
Yeah,
team, but
yeah.
rather now it's across the board. Everybody should know something about ESG and be equipped with it, right? And really, um, it's really about equipping yourself with the knowledge and you could be in two space, right? One, you could be in a space where you would want to move into ESG, or two, you just are in a space where you just want to stay relevant, right? Stay
Right,
relevant. So
right. Yeah.
either of these segments, you need to, I think, show your indication, your interest, and your desire and your commitment, right, to be able to stay relevant at the same time to move into the sustainable finance or ESG space. And that is to take on skills. I mean, you cannot um, um, just wait for the job appointment to be given to you without any indication on your end to say that you really want it. So I think that what
Yes.
we see as many candidates, and as I've spoken to them as well, we have many who says that they're taking the qualification because they want to move in the space and they want to show their desire, right? Their intent of doing
Yeah,
so.
signals the yeah,
Signals, yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah.
And some, they are really just trying to improve their skills, and when time comes for it, they know enough about the subject to be able to be eloquent, fluent in it, because they know it's going to hit them. It's just coming. It's a matter of time. So, but I think also important is that everybody will obviously. I mean, you can work with career coaches like Adrian yourself and team,
Yes.
and to understand what sort of skills and factors are in play, and so that before you want to think about career pivoting or venture or whatever sort. But yeah, it's always important to stay relevant, and change is the only constant, right? So
Awesome. Thank you so much for the shout out. And yeah, for those people who are new to us, IBF Careers Connect, if you do want to have a one-to-one session with a career advisor, please do write into us. Maybe they said at the chat box, I'll write the address to which you can secure an appointment. Now coming back to that, Yisheng, at the beginning of the session, I wanted to ask you a question, and I was
yep.
tempted to ask you a question, but I'm going to come back to it now. Again, it's more of a career related question. I haven't actually looked at the Q&A, but I'm pretty sure that somewhere, judging by the trends of previous sessions that we've done, there will come some there'll be a question like the one I'm asking you. And that is, when you think about your own career, and this is a reflective question, okay? When you think about your career, you start out in banking, in consumer banking, for example, and then you move to fintech, and then after now you move to BPP, and now and different products per se. It's not a linear path, and for most people that we work with, like job seekers, that kind of switch or that kind of move is not normal. Okay, if I'm honest, like moving from this to that. So how or what do you attribute your success to in terms of making those switches? Do you know what I mean? Was it a case whereby there was a common thread throughout all of these switches, or did you impress people sufficiently, for them to take a chance on you, to give you the opportunity? yeah, what was your secret? Perhaps you can enlighten, us here in terms of how you did it, and what factors in your life professionally helped you get to where you are now. Yeah, and considering the novelty of how you move from one thing to another, because most people like compliance all the way, right? If, for example, right, or risk pretty much all the way, or going up the ladder, but you moved a little bit, right? What's your secret, and sort of like what do you attribute your success to?
I think I am very privileged and and I know exactly what you mean. Where I have many
Mm,
colleagues who have worked in one function, eventually retiring at the end of the day at a
there you go. Yeah,
similar
yeah,
function.
yeah.
I and many a time, obviously, I obviously they wish that they had the opportunity to move around and to try new things, right? But for me, I think if I can share what I do and why I had such an opportunity is first and foremost, I look deep in myself. I think one thing that I think more often than not we're not able to identify clearly what our strengths are, what our
Exactly.
what
Yeah,
exactly our strengths. I'm a big fan of DISC, the
yeah,
personality sort of
yeah, yeah, yeah,
profiling,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm very clear what sort of profiles I am. And when I speak to someone, in a matter of minutes, I can know what sort of profiles they are also. And I think that it's important to know where my weaknesses lie at the same time. So knowing where your strengths are, then you need to know where your weaknesses lie, and you work on it, right? So one is knowing yourself. Two, it's when there's something new that I want to get involved in, for example, in the fintech space, obviously there are areas where I'm obviously not so privy to, for example, the technology part of things. And because I'm passionate about it, I read more about it. I get involved. I be intentional about trying to understand what happens in that space. And so even doing conversations with potential employers, they can see that sort of interest and that sort of knowledge that I can share about understanding what is what are sort of things that they're dealing with, and I pay close attention. But I think most importantly is to stay relevant and current, to be always be on top of what is the latest news or the latest developments in a particular space.
Mm-hmm.
So I think today, every day you're reading if you read the Straits Times, I think it's impossible to not find a particular article or page on climate change or on ESG relating sort of news nowadays. It has become so relevant, right? But I think one sort of a question that came to me recently when I was speaking at the CFA Society Korea webinar was why is it important to stay relevant, right? And I just wanted to share with them. And I said, look, it's something that you cannot even avoid. For example, let's talk about climate change with
Mm-hmm.
our humanly induced climate change, the thing, the kind of naughty things that humans do to increase the temperature of, like global warming temperature. And you see extreme weather events happening, extreme weather events. You start to see more and more a drought. You start to see more and more floods. You see extreme temperatures starting to happen, which is very odd. That shouldn't happen. I mean, just look at our Chinese New Year. It just keep raining non-stop, right? And it's
That's true.
so wet. But I mean, in Korea, oh my goodness, the temperature went to I think -15 to -25. Is something that is extreme and it really is around us already. It's just right in front of us, and we it is a function of what we do, and we cannot avoid it anymore. So staying relevant, understanding why things are happening, I think that would obviously allow you to position yourself better when any opportunity happen to come along. But I think I'm just very blessed to be given the chance to move along various career paths.
Awesome. Yisheng, again, another naughty question on my side. You moved from city, like from banks to the fintech and then to BPP. Was it a move due to networks and connections, or did you just, find these roles, or the roles found you? How did it work?
I think network connections definitely. I didn't exactly seek for roles.
Oh,
I,
okay.
I think it's more network and opportunities because in day to day. I mean, it's impossible not to have network, right? I mean, we are living in a country where we bump somebody every 5 seconds. So so I think it's important to treat everybody right. Trying to speak
Yeah.
to people and then have that right rapport, and they remember
Mhm.
you. at social gatherings, and whenever there's a need that comes along, they think that, oh, Adrian was someone I spoke to who was very intellectual about this particular subject, or who would be very suitable for this role. So
I think you just highlight. Okay, so basically, I just literally put that question out there for you in the hopes that you would answer it in hopefully the right way, and you did perfectly, because I think at the end of the day, the networks mean a lot, and I think this
yes,
is it's sort of like, not say harsh reality, but it's the truth, right? I mean, like, if you are mostly someone who's really reactive, and you don't go out and proactively meet new people through a variety of mediums, right? Then I think the challenge would probably be a bit harder for you in that sense. So I
absolutely.
think we live in a time where we need to probably push ourselves a bit more, and get out of our comfort zones. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you want to do a career pivot, that's already quite uncomfortable. So I think in order to do that, if you want to do that, then you probably have the capability to push yourself out your another comfort zone, which is to get to know people.
Mm-hmm.
And like what you mentioned, right? Because a lot of the success stories, and like what you mentioned, I just literally randomly asked you, how did you get your jobs, right? Was it like applying on job boards, or is it networks? And thankfully it's networks, right? People remember you, and then they think about you when the opportunity comes up. So I just want to reiterate to everyone here, that apart from the qualifications and so on and so forth, the soft stuff and the motivation and the confidence, the charisma, the chemistry, all very, very important here. Okay, now, so before we hit the chat, and there's a lot of questions, few questions, right? Very last broad question for me, if you don't mind, Cheng. And that is, for the folks here who have attended this session, attending session, what's your word of encouragement, or what would you tell them to do in taking like one step towards like the ESG space, putting their foot into the ESG space, if they haven't had any background whatsoever, what would you encourage them to do as a first step, if they want to venture into this space?
I think that for them actually attending today's session, it's already
Yay.
a first step,
All
in my
right.
opinion, right? Because it shows desire to learn more, and to really to understand what exactly would lead to a career in that. I
Mm,
think being interested and taking action, I think that's first. But at the same time, I think that be very I think you can be very focused in the search of what sort of qualification would work, because I think that whilst ESG is a red hot issue now, everyone's excited about it. There are also a lot of providers providing training in that area. I think not just that. I mean, you can see many in Coursera. You can see many in on various forms that you can think about. But I think when I mentioned earlier on about the CFA certificate ESG, I think it is one that was specifically requested or by FIs to say that we would like our employees to be trained in this area. So I think that and obviously, is it the whole company? No, obviously, right? You have people who are very specific in the investment sort of career. For example, the folks from asset management, for example, will be very relevant,
mm,
or guys who are in the product management team and whatnot. So, but we do see also people from compliance risk who
mm,
join us, or even some of the regulators in Asia Pacific. So, but I think that it's good to get started on a general introductory sort of course, which I think you can find it quite. I think even on IBF listed website that there's a lot of introductory courses that are
yep.
there for you to think about, and to get acquainted first on a foundational level of the subject, and then from there then think about how you work towards a functional role, because even as we have requests of late, one of which was very relevant on purpose of function, it's a financial institution wants the entire legal team to be fluent in ESG.
Got
So
it.
we were saying, okay, the legal team. So we spoke with our BP Law School,
Mhm.
together with our faculty on ESG, to come together to create and craft something that was very specific to legal trained professionals, right? And this was their in-house counsel for the financial institution,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
Because the functionality of ESG will start to differ based on the functional roles in the financial institution.
Right. Yeah.
Just to give an example on the legal side, right? The question is, what if we are sued based on these particular risks that we are not careful about, and one of which is social. Social is there are a lot of opportunities for risk, so that they are very concerned about. But do they understand what it means to be ESG relevant as an organization? I think those are things that will need careful calibration by companies to be very purposeful in preparing their employees, their division, the departments to be ESG ready. So I mean,
Right.
beyond what one can do to actively search out content for training for that, I think the companies will also need to take an active role and
Right.
part to prepare that the organization.
Awesome. Okay, so let's move on to the Q&A now. I'm just launching the Q&A, and
Sure,
you can join me as well, Cheng.
absolutely.
Okay, let's try anonymous attendee. Is BPP currently providing any ESG ratings or services to SGX listed companies? That's something you can take?
Actually,
Yeah.
we're not providing any ESG rating services to SG Listcos. I think we had a conversation with SGX sometime when they opened up that we were deliberating. I think for me, where I take care of the APAC Financial Services, I was very focused on the needs of financial institutions. So the Listcos obviously have that different sort of requirement from the directors and what. So we didn't want to be very we want our focus to be very concentrated on financial services. So
Got it.
we passed it. Yeah,
Okay, cool. And whoa, this one is gonna be tough. Leka,
sure.
thanks, Leka, for your question. Can you work in the sustainable finance sector in a non-quantitative role? Oh boy, what would be the ratio of available jobs that require quant/analyst/modeling ability versus someone with more ESG and more qualitative strengths?
No, that's a very good
Whoa,
question. No,
yeah,
that's an
big
absolute good
question. Yeah,
question.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm,
I, I think first and foremost, I think that we have to be very specific in the areas of that role, right? If you think about sustainable finance, it's not a particular segment of a company. It really is something that would permeate across the organization. I think that's important to
mm-hmm,
understand,
mm-hmm,
right? First and foremost.
mm-hmm.
Second, if just to share one of the recent examples that I was speaking with a
Right.
company on the modeling ability, for example, and they were addressing the actuaries segment, the division for actuaries, and there was a lot of them,
Yeah.
and really there obviously the question in their minds was is it relevant ESG when it comes to actuaries who are very focused on modeling, in making sure probabilities and whatnot are attained or not, in the insurance sector, for example, and we debated about it. At the end of the day, it is about the risk that they're taking, right? And um, and it's important, right? I mean,
Mm,
as for that company, it was an insurer. It was important to say, okay, what are the risk of a flood happening, for example?
mm-hmm,
What are the risk of damages to their insured assets, right?
mm-hmm.
Or even what are the risks of not transiting fast enough in the transitional risk sort of thing where assets become poorly rated, right? So I think from that perspective, it becomes very obvious to companies that, oh, that's important. We need to then think about ESG not so much from a specific area, but rather think a bit from a broad perspective as to, what it brings to the table across their function, and that would be the purpose of it. So the short answer to this question is I can't say that there is a specific ratio of jobs that require that versus
Mm,
ESG.
yeah.
I think it's a model of both, really, where ESG now is it's no longer just a specific thing you do versus that, but rather it combines everything. Things are all muddled together because of the fact that ESG itself is it's not just one single function. It's across all functions.
Okay, I'm also looking at this question. Rajesh, thanks for the question. Rajesh has a two-part question, one after another. Okay, so very quickly, I'm just going to read it out to everybody. ESG is a very broad topic: risk reporting, verification, mitigation, circular economy, and it is also evolving rapidly. New standards are coming regularly. There are many topics that have not yet been fully developed, e.g. transition finance. Given this, how relevant would it be to do a training program? For example, getting Scope 3 emissions data is a challenge for organizations. So how can a training help with this? And then part two is, I guess what I'm trying to highlight is that a high level training may not be very helpful unless you can get into a lot of technical details. Are there any training programs available for that?
Absolutely. That is a good question, Rajesh. That's a very good question. And one of the reasons why ESG is a evolving conversation is also because whilst we are all as individuals trying to grapple with the changes, so are central government bodies. To harmonize a standard that everybody uses is still ongoing. Everybody has different forms and ways at which how they think is the best way to actually report ESG. I think that in itself is one of the first, right? But more importantly, what Rajesh talked about is you're right. Having something that is generic will not be very useful at the start, and it has to be then what we call usually what we do is we to give an example in the financial services, right? We had a organization that came to us and said, okay, we want something that is relevant for a function like our credit team. Now, the credit team's role is to assess the company's creditworthiness, right? Are they naughty? Have they done something? Do we actually, lend money to them? Do we approve the credit, right? But yet we want an ESG lens and perspective to say that looking at financial reports is not going to cut it anymore. What else do we want to ask for? And not every company is coming out with a sustainability report, right? Some do, some don't. And how then do we assess? What kind of questions do we ask to ascertain that sort of rather behavior that we're looking out for as a bank, for example?
Right.
So we have to then obviously work with their team, the credit team, as to how they do the assessment, and we build a program based on their model of assessment, and then obviously then have a very specific, well-intended form and way to then enable an ESG lens during the process. So it's not going to be easy finding courses that are customized for individuals, obviously, because these are very customized programs for organizations. But that said, I believe many financial institutions are on that path. I mean, from the likes of Philippines, Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan, I've so many companies that are very excited about trying to build functional training across some of their roles, and I believe it's just a matter of time that there'll be that the training providers and courses will be very specific to the course. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And as expected, I want you to look at Nigel's question. Thanks,
Sure.
Nigel, for the question. Nigel asked, right? As expected, most of the advertised ESG related roles call for some years of experience. I already have ESG certifications, but zero experience, right? Appreciate your advice on what can be done to gain the experience. So I'm going to pass the grenade over to you first.
Sure. It is a tough one, obviously. I mean,
Yeah.
you must put yourself in the position of a company, right? When you advertise a role, you will want to advertise the role for the best foot forward to come.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
You want to advertise for something that will not they will not allow the best person to come forward for. So they will want to say, they want the sky, right? They will say, as many.
It's a commercial decision, right?
Yes, a
to hire
commercial
someone.
decision.
Yeah, plug and play, right? Yeah.
But what would happen? I mean, it always also depends on the number of applicants, right? And when you see that the role has been there couple of months, then you know that it's not that easy for them to hire with whatever dreams or objectives that they want to. It's not that easy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I did a lot of interviews back in the day, and I can tell you that whilst we put out job descriptions or requirements that are,
That's the dream state
it is
of
a dream
individual, right?
say.
Exactly.
Many
Yeah.
a time, if you
Ideal individual.
you hit about 80%, you are looking at it already. It's not
There we go.
easy
Yeah.
for that, and I can assure you that the number of ESG professionals to the demand is definitely, there's a big gap in the demand and the supply of such, and organizations are very willing to take people who have lesser experience than they sort out to be, but yet at the same time, I think there are, how do I put it, there are different organizations looking out for different professionals and a different degree of needs that they have. So I think that if you hang in there, you stay in there, you have the right qualification, you have the right certification that they're looking out for,
Mm-hmm.
I think it won't be long that you will have an opportunity to work in that space. Yeah.
Okay, so the next one will be hopefully helpful for Nigel as well. I'm gonna do because we're running out of time, so I'll just take the last one. And this one is basically Terence and Leka's question. I mean, if you look at it, right. So Terence asked, on the topic of networking, what are some of the events barring IBF events? Hey man, Terence, why don't you want to come to IBF events, right? Okay, but anyway, that are good to meet other potential employers. And then I think Leka also asked, are there any green finance networking groups you would recommend? So are there any sort of like industries or sort of like groups or associations that folks like Terence, like and maybe even Nigel can benefit from?
I think well, I am in some groups. I'm just looking at my LinkedIn on some of the groups that I'm in on ESG investing. I think you can see some of the network that I'm in. I think ESG investing groups are always helpful to be in. I think also I mean I'm in the British Chamber of Commerce Committee for Financial and FinTech, and
Mm-hmm.
there even in committees like that, we are very focused on the conversation on ESG and sustainable finance. I'm also in a committee for the Chartered Institute of Securities and Investment, and I think one of the things that we want to bring to the table is something that's relating to ESG as well to IBF. I think that it's not so much of trying to just suddenly pop up in a whole bunch of with a whole bunch of people and say, oh, we are all very green. I
Yeah,
think it
it's
doesn't work
true.
that way, but I think it's to slowly build towards networks of people that are passionate about the cause. Whilst I think there are many green groups that are more than financial services. They're more than financial services. They're
Mm.
truly green groups that will advocate a better world for all of us.
Oh yeah, I know
Well,
some of those. Yeah.
I'm not in one of those, but
Okay.
uh, but I think that on LinkedIn we find, I mean, I'm always in ESG investing groups that you can easily find, or climate investing groups that I'll participate in some of the conversations there, and in my community where I live, I think we have sort of little farm spaces that the community gets together to build things, and I'm involved in those little sort of farming things, and the conversation goes about sustainable living, about okay, we grow this kai lan, right, and then you grow, we don't have to buy from market anymore. So
Self-sustaining.
and
Yeah.
it's very interesting. It leads to interesting conversations. And I think that it's everywhere around us. Just need to look a bit closer. But I think more importantly, it has to be very focused. Meaning, what are you in there for, right? Yeah, are you in there for to find someone that you can network with so that you can be given an opportunity in future, or are you truly passionate about the green cause, and what sort of networking opportunity are you
Yeah.
looking out for? Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, you know what? I mean, we still have a bit of time. So what I want to do is I'm looking at Claire's question. I wanted to try Claire's question before we sort of wrap up and have you say some final words, right? So Claire's asked, and thank you, Claire, for your question. I am all for ESG, for a better world, and I wish to be part of this movement. However, I was told not to take a course unless I can get an internship in an ESG related field at the end of the course. It feels like a chicken and egg situation. How do we start?
Mm,
So I think this kind of sounds like that question I asked you about cost. Does a cost equal to a job? In this
mm,
case for Claire, you know, uh, you know, internship, no course and internship, but you can see the question. So what are your thoughts on Claire's question?
No, I think it's a good question, very relevant question. But I first want to know who told you not to take the course until you get an internship, because I think that
Yeah.
irregardless of whether you get the internship or not, from a knowledge perspective, from a skills perspective,
Hmm.
it is good for you to be equipped with it, all right? You will not be worse off. You will not be worse off after going for courses in ESG. You will not be a worse off person. You're gaining one more layer of
Something,
skills.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, you're gaining
you got something
yeah,
out of it.
yeah.
And what is other than having spent some time on the course, other than spending, some effort in passing maybe the certification,
Hmm.
what is worse off for you? Whilst you wait for the internship opportunity to come, there are a lot of others who are getting themselves equipped and with the right skills in that subject already, and they get an internship because the internship will now say with someone with their qualification later down the road. So I think it's not so much chicken and egg, but rather just go for it, get yourself equipped, and don't wait for an ESG internship to come to say that that is what you want. But I think one thing is important, is
Mm.
what is the career goal that you're looking for? What are you working towards in your career, right? Because if you're truly passionate about ESG and you want to be in that space, I think it's important to just go ahead and get your skills, instead of waiting for an internship to be landed.
Yeah, see, there you go. I get an opportunity to sell Kailan, so like come and see a career coach, right? That's my
Yes,
Kailan, right? Yeah, come
yes,
and see a career coach,
absolutely.
and we can have a one-to-one chat on this. But I guess what you say resonates, Yi Cheng, about Claire's situation. I think I mean, like what we mentioned and what we talk to people about, and if you're in this transitionary period right now, um, taking a course can only be a good thing, right? Yeah, because it's a feather in your cap, right? And if, like Claire mentioned, she wanted to be part of the movement, if that is the case, then nothing should stop her, or from demonstrating, or signaling to the market or the industry that I'm going to do this course because I do want to be part of the movement, right?
Mm,
Um, Hopefully I'll get an internship, but it's not the reason why I'm doing the course. I'm doing the course. Hopefully I'll get it, but even if I don't, I still want to do it.
mm.
So I think that's very, very good mindset. Okay. So I know that you got to run off, and I just wanted to say I always end the session with some final words from the guest, which in this case is you. Some motivational words of encouragement, wisdom that you want to leave folks here with. People who may be contemplating a major shift, maybe a small shift, major shift, and into this space. Any sort of like words of encouragement or wisdom, before I hand it over to Flo again?
Sure. I think I would like to start off by saying, um, ESG is not a fad. ESG is not going to go away.
Mm.
Sustainability is going to continue. And I think more importantly, you have to look deep within yourself, understand your strengths and weaknesses, and also where your passion lies. And if the areas of ESG excites you, if the areas of sustainable finance excites you, and then think about courses that would enrich
Mm.
yourself. You can get skills, equip yourself with skills that you'll be ready for any role that comes along, and not wait for it to be landed first. And stay passionate, stay curious, right? And hungry, just like how Steve Jobs would put it. And I think the journey is really exciting for Singaporeans and for this region. We have a high growth potential in this area, and so it will only benefit you if you stay true to the course and take action today instead of waiting for tomorrow to come.
Oh, that's awesome. I also just want to add a few cents worth, like what we mentioned. I encourage everybody who's in this space to also push yourself out there, push yourself and get yourself noticed. Expand your networks. Networks will be found everywhere. Family, friends. People that you meet at social gatherings, and so on and so forth. Like how Yi Cheng did it. Being remembered. For the right reason, obviously, to showcase your skills, your personality, because we always also know that the chemistry counts for a lot, and that's the reason why I feel that Yishan and I we sound like old friends, because there's a good rapport and chemistry, and I think that counts for a lot, right? In casual conversation and also in professional conversation. So push yourself out there, take learn something if you're really interested in it, because it can only be a good thing, right? So I want to take this opportunity, Cheng, to say thank you so very much for taking the time. I know you're
Thank you for having
traveling,
me.
and well, you're doing all these sessions, not just with the IBF, but with
The region,
countries, right?
yeah,
Where your
yeah.
regions, right? So thanks so much for taking the time for doing this with us. I also want to say thank you to everybody who joined us today. Very impressive crowd, because I was looking at the number 60 in 60 seconds. I mean, like literally when I was looking at when the doors opened, everybody came in. So really appreciate. Stay tuned for more IBF programming. Hopefully, there'll be something very soon that's interesting to you. And without further ado, Flo, do you want to say some final words, and then we can just go?
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks once again, Adrian and Yicheng, for that very candid, very insightful discussion and all the great tips that you have given our participants. I'm sure you've given them a lot to think about as they explore a career in sustainable finance. So we've now come to the end of today's session. Thank you once again, everyone, for joining us and your active participation. You may stay connected with us via LinkedIn or via our website or some of these social media platforms we have on screen. We hope to see you at the next session, and we hope you enjoyed today's session. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thanks
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.